Hello, my name is Julia Simpson, and welcome to a fantastic Scottish Summit of 2021. In this session, we are going to go over some fantastic finance features that came out over 2020. Um, Hopefully, you all enjoy, so let's get on started. But before we get started, it's most important that we thank our sponsors who have made this event possible. We have the wonderful Script Runner, DQ Global, Proximo Free, Redspire, Agilysys, and of course Hitachi Solutions. So, for those who don't know me, my name is Julia Simpson. I work as a senior finance consultant at HSO. I'm Australian born and bred, and I came over to the UK in 2013. And I thought I would give out consulting a try because I was so used to using this wonderful system that I called Exapta, or otherwise known as AX. I was using that I was using Exapta in a finance role. We worked for a small not-for-profit organization, and we pretty much was one of these organizations where if someone was sick, you jumped in and did their work, or if they were on holidays, you jumped in and did their work. So I got a fantastic coverage of using the system from the end user point of view. And as we upgraded, I went with the company and worked with the system. So very much I do love finance. I got qualified from CPA Australia when I finished my degree. Um, and I enjoy working with HSO. They're a fantastic company, and I love helping out my clients and finding cool solutions for them. Okay, so what are we going to cover off today? Well, it's really simple. We are going to be covering effectively two things. The first one, the stuff that happened in 2020 that got excited. So I've chosen my top four things in the 2020 release to show you, and I'm looking forward to talking about those. And then also the really cool stuff that happened in 2020 for Wave 2. So for those who don't know, Microsoft releases their deployment notes at the beginning of the year and in the middle of the year, and it's pretty much going to list out all the stuff that they plan on releasing throughout the year for the next 6 months. Um, Now, all of these features don't automatically get enabled in your environment. So if you are a client and an end user, it could be that you don't have these features turned on. To turn on those features, you just need to get your system admin, or if you have access yourself, you could do it and go into the feature management workspace. Word of warning with turning on any features, make sure that it's not going to get in the way of any integrations that you have, any particular developments that you have as well. So always turn on a feature in a development or a test-based environment. Okay, so fun stuff that we had that came out last year. This is my top four. Um, we can access the Wave Notes online. There's hyperlinks throughout this entire presentation, so hopefully you do have access to them, and you'll be able to go in and have a look at what got released. But for the moment, this is what I classify as my favorite features from the beginning of the year. Now, the beginning of the year means that they came out anytime pretty much up until like August. Okay, so the voucher transaction detail is up there. It's one of my, it's really cool. It's a lot of fun. So we'll have a look at that. The credit management functionality, in my point of view, made the system complete in terms of credit functionality. Um, this one was just something that was a real bugbear of mine. I really hated that we didn't have a validation on the invoice totals. So I'll show you that one as well. And then finally, automatic vendor payments. This one's just a nice little one. So Wave 2020 wasn't that big on finance features. I mean, you can see, but we did get the big one, which was credit management. So without that, the very first thing I want to talk to you about is the voucher transaction details. And the best way to show you this one is just quite frankly to hop into the system. Um, okay. Now all this feature does, it doesn't do a lot, but voucher transactions. This is the bread and butter of anyone that wants to inquire into an account. Whenever you go into your voucher transactions, you go back to this view here. If you go for your trial balance and you drill down, you go to this view here. If you're using Financial Reporter and again you drill down, this is where you end up. So it's really cool. And what's made this really lovely is they have finally, and I appreciate this, they've brought in the supplier account and the supplier name and the customer account and the customer name. Now, this isn't dependent on you using pending invoices and doing everything in the way that Microsoft wants you to do things. This is finally here, and it makes life so much easier. It's one of these things where people often want to have the customer or the supplier as a dimension, and you really got to push them away. You really got to push people away from doing that sort of level. So having it here is just a huge, just a bit nice, to be honest with you. And it hasn't hugely impacted performance, and we don't have to use the Accounting Source Explorer, which I appreciate was Microsoft's previous solution for this, and I was super excited about it when it first came out, but it kind of the shine wore off a little bit with the Accounting Source Explorer because you couldn't personalize it the way you can with voucher transactions, and transactions don't automatically default to Accounting Source Explorer. Accounting Source Explorer still has its place in my heart though, particularly for consolidated based transactions. Okay, so feature number 2 is the big one. Which slide do I on? This one, here we go. And that is credit management. So I'm going to talk to you about all of the 4 elements that we have, and then we're going to hop in and I'm going to show you a little bit around in case you want to set this up or trial it out yourself. So the first one that came about with the credit management features is risk scores. And this is essentially where you can create like some sort of risk classification and have it assigned to your customers. From there, you can do a bunch of extra stuff with it. And at first, I poo-pooed this a little bit because isn't this why we use like credit checkers and they give you like a score? But I realized that there's an actual lot of value in it, and I will talk over those in a moment. All right, credit limit management. Again, there's a whole bunch of functionality that has been introduced around credit limits. We have workflows, we have temporary limits, we have insurances. It actually makes it pretty much a very good solution now in terms of credit limits. All right, we have the ability to add automatic credit limits. So, depending on the risk score or some factors, maybe the country that the customer is in, you can automatically assign a credit limit, which is actually a lovely little feature as well. And then finally, the big one that I think is the blocking rules. So we can automatically put sales orders on hold throughout various stages of the sales process. And that I mean like quotes, I mean picking lists, dispatch lists, pro forma invoices, the whole shebang. And it's a really cool matrix there as well. So let's have a little look-see at it all, shall we? Okay, here we are on our customers. So you will notice if you scroll on down, look at all the extra fields we have now. Oh, so good. We can record, again, credit limits. You can assign credit management groups and you can have risks associated to that credit management group as well, which is really cool. Here we have a range of extra credit limits. So we do have the ability to add a credit limit. Now, if there was workflow enabled for this field, we would have to go up to a credit limit adjustment and do it up through there. We also have, and I love this one for retailers, expiry dates. So you can have temporary credit limits from a start and an end date as well, which is just fantastic for seasonal purchasing. You can also loop in the insurance and guarantee amount, and that if you did have an insurance and guarantee amount, you could either choose to have it add to your credit limit or not add at all. For reporting purposes and for alert purposes, you can set up review dates, which is pretty cool, and we have a range of different statuses as well. So that's just what we have here on the customer as our new fields, but it gets better. Up the top, we have our credit management tab. Okay, and again, we can do our temporary credit limits, which again have journal workflow functionality. And here is, you can look at the temporary ones and the insurance guarantees as well. And in the insurance and guarantees, you can record like expiry dates, which is pretty cool. So under risk scores, here we have a set of scoring groups. Now you control what these scoring groups are, and you control the rate of the scoring group. And you can have some ones which are system calculated, such as average days and the balance, or you can have a range of different fields as well, such as country, or any custom fields that you want based on fields on the customer. And for each of these groups, you essentially say, well, from this range or from this parameter, so for example, if the customer is between 60,000 and 70,000, which this customer's average balance is, we wanted to give it a risk contribution of 5. And then you can add all your risk contributions together to get a total risk score. From there, you can assign that risk score into a risk group, and you can do some really cool functionalities around there, which I think is lovely. It's a lot of fun, although it does make you think how you're going to classify your people and how you're going to have your scoring, because you don't want to have a score that's too high or a score that's too low. Something else you'll notice is we have a credit and collections parameter tab now as well, which is found in the equally named workspace. And something that's really cool is our checkpoints now. So have a look at here. And this is something that I just love because previously it was at confirmation, delivery note, and invoice. And any of you guys know that once if you're packing up your goods and you're about to ship them off, having it at the delivery note phase is just quite frankly too late. So we have the picking list and the release to warehouse. So you can have it checking at each of those phase stages, and you can also look at pro forma. If they generate a pro forma, give it a warning as well. Generally speaking, I wouldn't use a pro forma. You can also incorporate grace days if you want to be kind to them. So then we have blocking rules, and this is the really cool stuff because you can automatically put purchase sales orders, I should say, into an on hold process, and they then have to be approved and go through an approval process. It's a lot more flexible and a lot more automatic than it previously was. And you can choose things such as, how many, if the customer has days overdue, or if they've got a particular account status as well, we can put them automatically on hold every time a sales order gets released. You can have a look at the terms of payment. So if you have any cash terms of payment, maybe you want those orders to automatically go on hold until the account is at a reduced balance. And you can also have a look at the remaining credit limit as well, or any overdue amounts. So it's just so much fun and so much more configurable than what we were used to, which is why it's rated as my #1 improvement in the first wave. It very much makes, particularly for retailers or any sort of supply chain businesses, it's a lot more useful than what it used to be. Okay, so this next one is a bugbear for anyone that uses the invoice register, and I appreciate that there's maybe only be a few people on this front, but so bear with me. For those who don't use the invoice register, I applaud you. We do have some clients that have to use it, and I always found what I hated about the invoice register. I'm going to show you. So you put a lovely little invoice into your invoice pool. Here we go. Look at this wonderful invoice. It's for 15,935. Happy days. It looks good. It's doing the right accounting. You're pre-recording your VAT. Everything is fine. You then come through to the pending invoice and you match it up to the PO, and maybe the PO is slightly different. But what used to happen whenever you would submit this into workflow, it would essentially allow you to go through workflow, allow you to go through the whole approval process, and then as it tried to post it, you would get an error message. And that used to drive me, I hated it. Because I love the system, and to have such a stupid little process like that really just made me upset. But now, here we are. This wonderful little error message is that the purchase order and registered amounts are not equal. I know that's not a huge thing, and I appreciate that anyone that doesn't use the invoice register and pending invoices through purchase invoices is not going to care. But for those who do, this is really lovely. Okay, so moving on, we have the final feature that I love in wave 1, which is the automatic vendor proposals. So this is where we can get it to automatically generate for us our payment proposal every week. This is really good if you do like weekly employee expense runs, weekly backs runs, any sort of periodic process. And let's face it, vendor payments generally are. You often will say we pay on the 15th and the 30th in that situation. So there's a way to get those journals automatically generated for you, so you can then just maybe do the review and generate the backs file after there. So, and this is something you'll notice, it's coming out, pretty much all of the modules are coming with this process automation workspace, and you'll often find it hiding in the setup section. So here under create process automation, we can choose what we want to do, and we want to do a payment proposal. this to me says that they're going to be expanding this because you can choose from the drop down. You can then choose the company that you need to do, or happy from here. So from here we can say weekly employee expenses. Okay, you can give it your description, you can assign it an owner, and then you set up how often you want it to run. So maybe we wanted it to run at 8:30. Oops. Okay, we'll go back. There we go, 8:30, and we set a start and an end date, and how often we want to repeat. So not every weekday, but weekly on Mondays. You then choose how you want to be alerted, so maybe you just want to receive an email once that's happened. Okay, and from here, this is going to look very similar to if you ever done a payment proposal. It's all the exact same fields. We choose the journal name that we needed to populate, and we choose how we select the information, all of the relevant offset information as well, and then we do our normal filter to choose which record. So maybe you want to be backs and employee group, a vendor group employees. Once from there, you click on finish, and it will just be good to go. Easy as that. And once you get your journals automatically generating for you, you can then have a look into it as well. For those in the UK, remember to do 3 days earlier for your BACS payment run. Okay, so that is 2020. I appreciate there's not a lot that I've mentioned here. I am trying to focus on the functionality that mainly impacts a finance user. Fun fact for you, the credit management functionality is actually listed as a supply chain feature. So often if you do have a look at the Wave release notes and you don't see anything interesting in finance itself, have a look at the supply chain release notes or the cross-app release notes. Alrighty, Wave 2. Rightio, this is the one, and to be honest with you, some of the functionality in Wave 2 still hasn't come out or has only just come out. As to typical in the Microsoft fashion, just because they say they're going to deliver it doesn't mean we're going to get it. They can push it back, they could only put it into preview. If the preview didn't go well, they may push it back even further as well. I'm looking at you, Financial Insights. Rightio, so the big thing that came out in Wave 2, and this is the one we got a lot of functionality in finance, was the asset leasing module. Oh, I love this module. We'll talk about this in a moment, actually. So, asset leasing. Invoice automation was also supposed to be coming out, and I'll talk about that one in a moment as well. It has come out, just so you're all aware, but there's a range of invoice automation functionality. There's about 8 functions that were introduced. The business documents got the improvements, so many improvements that I finally have now accepted that it is an actual contender and option when you decide how you want to do your external facing documents. So it's now actually usable compared to what it was prior to the Wave 2. And then finally, these last 2 are small ones, and they're like my voucher transactions or my workflow warning signs. They are never going to change the world, but my gosh, I do love them. And that's the embedded BI and invoice note management. So without further ado, let's get started, and we'll first talk to you about asset leasing. So this came out in November, and it didn't even do a preview, went straight into general release. So as long as you have the November PU update, you'll be able to use it. And it essentially, reason why we went straight into release, it was Microsoft purchased some of the IP for the Crow solution functionality, which is then essentially allows us as leasees to correctly account for our leases, which is super, super cool. And it will work with IFRS 16, which I know a lot of people have been crying out for, and quite appalled that Dynamics hadn't suited that when we first came out, 3 years ago? Was it 2017 then it came out? It was 2017 or 20, I think it became optional in 2017. And IAS 17, which is the old one, and ASC, there's a couple ASC numbers, but I don't personally know the ASC numbers. So it's really, really useful. So let's have a look at it, and I'll give you a quick understanding of how you need to set it up as well. So we can go into here. So the lease module kind of works similar to the asset module as well. There's very similar concepts. Things are in a little bit of a weird place, but in a sense they are still very, very similar to if you set up a fixed asset module, you should be able to work your way through the lease module. The first thing, similar to what you have to do with an assets, is set up a lease group. And they will tie, that's what you tie your ledger postings to, and it's also what you tie your books to as well. So again, just like we have within fixed assets, we have fixed lease books. And the lease books will again post it to our current layer, and it also determines the accounting framework as well. And you can link the two together between your assets and your books exactly the same way as what you do with if you did in the fixed asset module. Now, something to note, which I often forget about, is the pay to supplier. This module is super cool, and it can raise your lease payments against a supplier, which could then be picked up on a BACS run. But it will only do that if you got this ticked as yes. Otherwise, it's just going to do ledger to ledger account based journals rather than to a supplier journal. Okay, so once you have the setup, and I have missed a couple of steps, I've missed the posting profiles and I've missed extra executory costs. So if you get like cleaning included or maybe servicing, insurance, those elements, I haven't included those elements. But here we have the workspace. Again, it's a very similar looking workspace to the fixed assets. It has been designed to it does look like a normal Dynamics workspace. We can have a look at all of the open leases, and you can see there is just a bucket load of fields for you to play around with. The only thing to note is that the lease ID number is going to be numeric. You can't change it based on your leasing groups, which you could do on a fixed asset. Okay, so from within here, you would essentially create your asset shell just as you would before, and then you fill in all this information to populate your book. You'll notice here we have all the different books that we could be applying to it as well, if that was what was needed. Things you'll need to fill in. You will need to give it a description, you will need to give it a fair value and your borrowing rate and your life as well. Annuity due will modify what the amount is that you have to pay, so make sure your compounding input and your annuity due are correct. Your supplier account is very important if you are using that functionality, and if it is always get the two confused between operating and finance, but if it does need to be transferred to a fixed asset, this is where you put in that fixed asset number as well. So you will need to create the fixed asset first. From here we have all the right of use information and the initial liabilities and amounts that it needs to accrue. Those who are used to the IFRS standards will understand what this is. If you're not used to it, I'm sorry. There's some fantastic Crow demonstrations that can talk to you about this, and also accounting, just general blogs on how to account for your leases. Also very important that you record your payment schedule. So this needs to be when you're going to start, how many periods, and how much as well. Now, if you do have a lease that has incorporated like insurance or cleaning, this is the actual lease element, not those elements there. Those elements go into executory costs. So realistically, this lease here is $1,600 a month, but of that $1,600, $1,300 is the lease element and $300 is a cleaning expense. From once you've filled in all this information, you would create your schedules, and you can incorporate workflows into here to approve the schedule. So someone might have to come in and press on the actual confirm button, which you guys will see in just a moment. And it's not loading, so you're not going to see it, but you will be able to see, and you have to click on confirm. Oh, here we go. Here we go. And so what we can see here is we can see that yes, it has been confirmed, and we have currently just accounted for the first month. As each month gets populated and we produce those journals, which you do again via a similar sort of batch process within the fixed assets, you'd be able to see the journal number and the posted date. The system very nicely breaks down the payment schedule versus the amortization schedule for the liability and the asset. If it is linked to a fixed asset, this section here is blank and you have to go into the fixed asset module for that, and then the expense schedule as well. You can have a look at all the transactions and all the journals that have been processed. So this is really super useful, and it's just a lovely little module, to be honest with you. The reports are nice looking, they're functional, they do what they need to do, and you can definitely tell that someone produced this with the goal of getting money in mind. Okay, so let's go on. Okay, so vendor invoice automation. 8 functionalities got released, and they have gone into general availability in January. I personally, I've been not very well over January and February, so I haven't had a chance to look into these. When I looked at the preview functionalities back in December, I wasn't hugely impressed, and there was a lot of bugs, which I have assumed, if it's gone into general availability, have been fixed. So let's talk about the functionality and that got introduced, and I'll tell you about what I'm most excited about. So the first one is we automatically hope that when you see a vendor invoice automation, you hope that it's going to be an OCR based solution. Unfortunately, it is not. All of these functionalities are designed to make Dynamics work with solutions. Often when I've had clients that have got an OCR provider and we want to feed that information in, there's been developments. It's been difficult. Now all of those would probably be out the door and we could use all of the standard functionality. You will still need to have an OCR provider, be it the Power Platform OCR provider or a third-party OCR provider. You will still need to pay for that. The Power Platform one is a subscription based on the number of runs you do. So again, check out the cost of that and compare it to the various different solutions as well. But the first functionalities, we do have some metric reporting. So we do have BI reporting that is going to help us figure out how the OCR solution is performing, how many matches we're having, and getting information through. So yeah, not as exciting as the next ones. This next one is super, super cool, and I love this one. And to be fair, you could use this one without having OCR. How many times, particularly in retail, and I have done a lot of retail-based projects. My company is very well known for retail. Have you put in your invoice, you're going to go match it, only to realize that it hasn't been received yet? And again, this is super, super common with retail. People, when they ship the goods, will get the invoice, but we haven't got the goods yet, which makes three-way matching really, really hard. So what this process will do is it's going to automatically cycle through. It's going to automatically look based on the batch process and try to do that matching for us. And where it can, match it on in, and from there we can, just update if we need to, submit it to a workflow, do what you need to do, which I just think is absolutely cool. I love that fun. So cool. Okay. This one again. You'd think we would have had this by now, and that is essentially validation of vendor invoices before you submit it to workflow and before you post it. Pretty much, if you remember in journals how we can simulate postings or validate your journals, we're pretty much getting something similar on here, which is just really going to be, quite frankly, a time-saving process. Okay, so that one's good. Now this one. This is what is really exciting with the whole OCR thing, and that is the automatic submission of vendor invoices. So, can't believe I've had to develop this one, and just the look of astonishment on clients' faces when I told them, yeah, okay, so we'll import your 100,000 invoices, but you're gonna have to submit them each individually to the workflow. And I tell you what, that did not fly, and you can understand why. But now we can automatically submit them to the workflow, which means that development has become essentially defunct. I apologize, but we didn't know this was going to come out in the time. This was 2 years ago. But if you are going live now and you are going to use OCR, yes, this is really cool. Okay, so I have very strenuous links between my icons and my titles here, and this next one is a train track, and we are tracking the imported invoice information with with what's actually in Dynamics. So again, I've done development for this. We had the OCR, we were bringing the information in. The OCR solution would give us the total amount of the tax, the total amount of the invoice, and we had to check that that actually matched what we matched to that PO line as well. So the ability to track between the two and make sure that they do match up is just a lovely little feature as well. Okay, the invoice receive date. So this one I was less so excited about as a UK person because we have invoice receive date for a long time for statutory reasons. But if you don't have that functionality, I can imagine this is very, very useful. So you can actually see when you receive the invoice so that you know when it needs to be paid, or when compared to when you entered it or when you posted it. Really lovely little functionality here. This next one is a view of the history for the information. So when you had an invoice that went through the workflow, often it was hidden away. There was quite a lot of mouse clicks to get to it, and you never really got a nice little picture of either why something got rejected or approved and the commentary that came along with it. So this has made it a lot easier to see. So again, not quite related to OCR in that situation, but related to making the whole invoice process a lot more functional. And then finally, automatic resubmits. So if something gets knocked out of the workflow, you can recall it, you can fix all the ones and get a bulk resubmit, which is just a lovely, lovely little functionality. Okay, so business documents. For those that know what electronic reporter are, business documents are the next evolution of that. There's plenty of workshops today around business documents, so I'm not going to go into it so much, but essentially it's Microsoft's solution to being able to bring control into the user to be able to develop sales invoice, purchase order confirmations, your basic sort of documents. And that was really good. But whenever you generated these documents, they came out in the Word or the Excel format. And you had to download the file. And it was embarrassing, to be brutally honest with you. You know, you create this beautiful little Excel template, you upload it, you get the system to generate invoices in that Excel template. You cannot invoice and send that Excel template off to the customer. You can't send a sales invoice to a customer in Excel. What were they thinking? But they have made it so that you can now directly send these documents straight to a printer, and you can also convert them to PDF, which makes it, actually, to be honest with you, usable. I wouldn't have used it up until October of this year. So now that we can convert to PDF, it's so much easier. And it's really quite simple to set up, essentially. And also the really cool thing that we have is under print destinations. Here we go. You specify your file, and if you do want it to email, unlike the default templates that you get, you can completely control the body of the email and the header of the email as well. So you can hyperlink in like the customer name or the remittance amount, or in this example, it's a supplier remittance. So we have the supplier name, we have the remittance amount, we have the date, and that's all being brought in together. And then we have and essentially I'm just telling you how to loop it all together. You then loop it up through the default form print settings. So I just want to show you quickly where that is. Oh, my session has ended. I've taken too long to talk. But effectively it's under electronic reporting, the electronic reporting workspace. Here we are, and we want to go to reporting destinations. From here, you choose the relevant invoices that you want or the relevant documents that you want, and then you can specify what you want to do with it. So if you wanted to go via email, you could, in your settings, you can choose this. You can select email here, or enable that, and then you can custom control the body, and you can hyperlink in information as well, which is really cool based on the model of the invoice. So you can same what we have within this general electronic reporter format and functionality. I won't go into that. I have got some webinars. If you're interested, hit me up and I'll show you about that. Right, so that's the interesting part. Here is the interesting part. If you scroll across, convert to PDF. I know. One little tick box and an option down the bottom, so you can choose if it needs to be portrait or landscape, and that has made it actually usable. So yes, I'm very excited for that, because now I can start recommending it to businesses and to my customers if they choose not to go down a route like LaserNet as well. So a lot of cool things about this. Okay, now this next one. Never have I been so excited about, actually there's 2 times I've been excited about one little button. The first time was when I saw the flow buttons in Dynamics Finance and Operations, and I clicked on it and it just took me to the flow webpage. Hugely disappointed. But here, BI reports. We all know and love this BI report, or we love to hate it. Let's be honest with you here. And you know, we can do a bit with the filters, but now look at this lovely little button. Look at it. It's fantastic. You can edit them. If a pie chart is not your thing, you know what I mean? You can change your visualizations. You can bring in any of the fields in these in the data model. We could change this, make it a funnel. Who doesn't love actually a donut? Who doesn't love a donut? A donut chart. It's so much nicer than a simple pie chart. Donuts all the way. And you can loop in extra information. You can change the formatting. Something to note though that this will be counted as a personalization, so it'll be for you, um, just to be aware of. Okay, I'm gonna have to pause because my headphones are about to die. Alright, so headphones are plugged back in and we are back in the system. So here we go. We are back on our lovely little presentation. So yes, I got super excited. This came out in October and it was the edit button. I know. I need to get another life, but here we go. It is what it is. And the only downside is you can't loop in extra data yet. You can only use the fields that are already used in that embedded BI workspace. The final baby that I want to show you is around invoice note management, and this was a gap that I have had in the past as well. And that's where on sales documents you wanted different notes for maybe different customer groups. So let me show you this bad boy. What we can do here is you can actually do different notes on headers and on lines. And we can specify particular accounts, individual accounts, or we can specify maybe an all or for a group of accounts as well. And you can have different notes at different stages on the process. So this is a standard note for all processes. This one is just a custom note for the invoice. And this is a note if someone happens to purchase this speaker cabinet as well. And I just think this has got so much possibility. It's going to be so useful to loop into your reporting purposes, which I think is a really cool functionality. Okay, so that is it for my top functionalities. This came out in October, by the way. It's not a hugely complicated functionality, but it's really, really cool. All right, so 2021. The release notes have been released. So I'm going to talk you through what I think is the most exciting functionalities. In finance, to be brutally honest with you, we got a little bit shortchanged. If you have a look, the main one that we have to look forward to is Financial Insights. Now, I've been seeing Financial Insights since this time last year, and I'm still not impressed with what I'm seeing. It's been riddled with problems and riddled with complexities, and you do have to have certain based environments, which means it's not commonly out there for all to use. So I'm hopeful that it does come out and it does sing do all the dancing and the bell whistling of what Microsoft have promised. If it does, I'll be very excited. Okay, now this one is cool. This is these next three are actually supply chain features. But you know what? We count in finance too. And to be honest with you, they feel very much like a finance functionality. So we're going to get two new modules, which is really, really cool. And the first one is the landed cost module. So I'm going to hold 10 because I haven't seen any previews of this one, but hopefully it's going to be what we need and it's going to help us with the whole shipment and freight and transit, particularly if you have goods that are traveling around the world from Asian countries into Europe, maybe into the UK, maybe up through to the US after there. So looking forward to seeing what this is going to have for us. Now this one, if you're part of the insider group as well, you can have a look at the demos for this and it looks fantastic. It's a whole module around rebate management. So this is a super, super cool module and it's going to help us it's going to help you with like all of those custom-based rebates. Generally speaking, the rebate module, how it worked before, is you would have to have the customer set up for rebates before you raise sales orders. This has made it so much more customizable, so much more flexible as well. So it's definitely one to look forward to if you do rebates and refunds and royalty processing. Really cool. Now this final one, I first got really excited because I saw vendor bank approval, but it's a self-service interface. So I'm waiting to see what's going to happen with this one and the licensing implications of this one. Hopefully it's more around the Power Platform or a particular app and we don't have to go through the whole rigmarole of having the vendor set up as a team member because that would just be, quite frankly, pointless. Okay, that's it from me. Thank you guys so much for listening. Please feel free to tweet about the Scottish Summit using the hashtag Scottish Summit 2021 and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye!